Well, I will tell you what, that was a great little conversation we were having.
Yeah.
To not even have nothing to talk about from the beginning. All right,
Beautiful.
we can redo that. John Olin Caddick. Is that how you say his name? Is it Caddick? Caddock? How do you say this guy's name?
Hold on, let me pull it up.
Caddick would sound right to me.
All right, Caddick.
Which one are we doing? The Olin and Caddick first?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one we're redoing, right?
Yeah, we'll redo that one because there was some fighting going on between two dogs.
Yeah. We should have taped that for the insider.
You should have. Yeah, that would have been a good thing. We could probably got.
Sure, you're right. They're sitting there barking at each other like they're talking,
and it didn't stop. It all week long. And my daughter finally said, "Dad, you want me to take one of them dogs?" Yes, please. So, and they've got a pit, and that little Chiweenie has beat the pit up already. Establishing dominance.
Let me open up my. Let me see if I can find that thing that I. Whoops! I'm hitting the wrong stuff over here. Yeah, that was very interesting. If Vince does sell, I'm with everybody else. I don't know. It's going to be a hard thing to think about. To whether or not they'll be able to survive that. So
it'll be a good 7-8 year, maybe 10. But eventually, as we know, if you don't know the wrestling business, you can't do it. It just it doesn't work. It didn't work really with WCW, and then you're going to have all these people jockeying for position, backstabbing all over the place. There's no clear. It's going to be a disaster, as far as I'm concerned. I've never seen it work. Never seen anybody buy a company out and then it continued out after that. Now Vince McMahon Jr. bought from Vince McMahon Sr. That worked out all right, but that's one family member buying from another. Corporations, they don't have any. They don't have any traditions they stick to. They just looking at the bottom line, and when it becomes where it's losing money or whatever.
And you know that there's somebody already at either Disney or NBC that's raising their hand, going, "Hey, I can turn this thing around."
Yes,
they're probably related to Vince Russo, but they watched wrestling once when they were a kid. So they know everything.
Disney has got, so far as I'm concerned, that Mandalorian's the only thing worth right now, but they've taken the Star Wars and just set it on fire and burned it. And they're about to do the same thing with Marvel. I hear that there's really no interest in the upcoming stuff coming up.
I don't know. The stuff I've been watching has been pretty good to me. I like it.
Well, they're saying that the upcoming movies, they've delayed 2 of the releases.
Yeah, and I don't know about the movie. I'm talking about the series that they're doing on Disney Plus. Those series are pretty good, but those are all laying groundwork for the movies.
Right.
So they're telling a lot of backstories that if you don't, watch those series, when the movies hit, you're not going to know, everything that's going on.
Richard, I've got it done. We're going to do it probably next week. Jack Scott, something we're going to do on next Monday night. We're going to do a thing on Tom Drake. Jack Scott it together, and we'll do Pro Wrestling USA. We'll just talk about the matches, a couple of the matches that happened in Memphis to start with, and then we'll go from there. There's not a lot to talk about, so it'll be a very short video. I mean, but we can talk about the problems that maybe they had even from the beginning. Maybe we can talk about that. But Richard Hood, well, that's just who we talked about. Michael Barr, Jack, do you plan on bringing Russell south to Dothan, Alabama?
No, we're not going to come to Dothan. Ben and Dennis already run a really good quality show there. I don't believe in going into somebody else's town. Now, it's possible we could go up the road to Enterprise. We do have someone interested in doing something there at some point, but that's, may or may not happen.
Aaron said, "Are you going to bring back the mink coat tournaments?"
Sure.
Yeah, we're scouring the used clothing stores now for the deals.
Hey, Linda might let us borrow hers again. Who knows?
Shane and Stephanie, Shane and Stephanie do not have the experience to run it.
I don't agree with that. Shane is very good at what he does up there. Stephanie, she's been one of the main folks in management there for 20-something years. She's really good.
Yeah, I think they just don't. I think they're too close to it. I think they have the ability to run it. I think they're too close. They can't see. You know how you get too close to something, you need to really step back to see what's wrong. They're too close to it. They don't have time to think about it.
Well, I think
too much they're producing.
If you look at NXT, that is Triple H's baby. He's given full control of that. And that product is so much better than anything that Vince produces, that it's like it's two separate entities. Yeah. So if it were me, I would put Stephanie over the business and Triple H over the creative. And if I were Vince, I would just go find an island to retire on and keep living off those residual checks, and not sell. But,
Terrence Hardy is with us. Terrence, how are you doing? Michael Barr said when there are matches that are disqualifications, it is like a cliffhangers and the fans lose interest. I believe they do when you do it too often. And there were some times that they did disqualifications a lot. And I think it hurts a company. I think there have to be winners and losers. And occasionally you go do a disqualification, but that's when you're going to come back in a no disqualification match. There's a reason why you're doing it, not just to be doing it so you could get out of it. I'll tell you who was bad about doing DQs. Booker that was bad about doing them was Buck Robley. Horrible at doing DQs. I don't think he cared, so he just went back and went, "All right, Brody, you and Bad Leroy Brown. I tell you what, let's just hit the referee disqualification. Thanks so much." I really believe that's what he did, because he would do some things good on television, but the arenas were just, they lacked something. Am I right, Rodney? During that point in time, they just lacked some creativity.
A bunch of people he didn't want to beat. That's what it just come down to. And who said that Brody was ever going to do a job? You're asking me to do a job? Well, I'll quit first. Forget that.
Michael Barr said, Rodney, you spoke of fire matches. I think we're talking about throwing a fire. Why did the flame stay around as long as he did? But he didn't do it all the time. He didn't throw fire all the time. No. They didn't do it constantly. But Jerry Lawler did it almost every week sometimes. It's just not something to do every week.
Exactly right. It's kind of like the first chair you use in a match gets over real good first time, but by the seventh time you use it in the same night, it doesn't have its appeal. It's the same thing there.
Yeah, Ole Anderson told the story about if you're driving down a road and you see a horrible wreck, he said that first time, and you stop, you look, you're concerned. He said, man, you're like, man, this is horrible. He said, you may even cry. You'll see somebody laying out there all messed up. He said, you go down the road about 15 miles and you see another wreck. And he said, and you're a little concerned. You're still a little bit, man, I can't believe that happened again. He said, by the time, get on down the road, you see another one 15 miles down the road. He said, by the time you get to that sixth one, you don't even care anymore. And same thing about wrestling. If you do something all the time, then it it gets stale to the people. And that's the one thing I have to say about Ole. He understood, don't do too much. Don't do too much, especially when you're weekly territory, you're coming back once a month or whatever. You just can't do that. And I think he understood that. And Jody Hamilton didn't use the fire all the time. He picked his places where he wanted to do it, because you couldn't do it every week. Because if you try to burn somebody every week, it loses something. Am I right, guys?
Yeah,
exactly. And then it also buries your promotion. You got to say at a certain point, hey, you're not going to do that here anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and once fans see that the guys getting burned aren't really getting burned,
that's true.
Takes away that believability.
And that's what happened to the wrestling. When we talk about territories, that's what happened to the territories. They can blame Vince McMahon all they want, but the inability to do something new, something innovative, is what put them out of business. And it had nothing to do. Continental Wrestling was dying before David Woods took it over. People can blame David Woods all they want, but Continental Wrestling was dying under the Fullers and that group, because they were doing the same thing over and over again, using the same guys over and over again. And it's because they just ran out of ideals. And they didn't want nobody else doing it. So, especially Robert. Loved Robert to death, but he wanted to be the booker every time there was another booker. He'd always say he could do a better job every time. And he could for about 3 months, and then he'd kill it. I mean, he just within 6 months, he'd be drawing nothing, because he tried to do the same thing over and over and over again. That's what happened to the territories.
And not moving, and Robert didn't like to move talent.
No.
And so when a new tech booker came in, they changed the talent, and then Robert said, well, I can take over here, and I can. And he was right, he can. And then 3 months later, he didn't move any talent because he found it hard to give people notices. So they stayed there way too long and in the same position.
Y'all, did y'all happen to watch the Shawn Michaels A&E deal? Did y'all hear what he said about the Fullers?
No.
In this, Jack, should we say what he said?
Yeah, go ahead.
He said in the interviews, the only territory he ever worked for, that he could get half. If he was getting $100, he could get $50 in cash and $50 in blow. That's what he says on the A&E special on WWF in his career. That doesn't say something good for the Fullers, does it?
Well, the first time I quit was because I caught a certain someone doing that in the dressing room that was in a management position, shall we say. And I walked in and asked him what I was supposed to do. And he goes, who are you again? And I said, never mind. That was not your dad quit too.
I feel so bad for them to getting that bad press, but this is going to be bad for them in the I wouldn't want to be them on television. I won't want to.
Well, it said if you want to be remembered kindly, you need.
Whoops, we lost him.
It was going to be a profound statement too.
It was.
He'll have to repeat it. He'll have to repeat that. We cannot allow.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. If you want to be remembered kindly, then you have to live that kind of life. And if you don't want people talking about the bad things you've done, then don't do the bad things. And you knew they were bad things when you were doing them. All of us have done stuff we shouldn't have done, but we knew what we were doing when we did it.
So if it comes out, so be it, I guess. It's just, that's just part of it. Looking forward to seeing you in Enterprise, Jack. Charles said we're having a jockstrap tournament coming soon.
Okay. Well.
Richard Hood said, Brent, no, not Buck Robley. Buck had some great ideals, but Buck was, when it came to, he had extracurricular activities that was more important than putting the matches together. And I believe in the end, that's probably, I think the incident with the Bruiser Brody kicking him out of the wheelchair was just a reason to get rid of him. I think that was just the reason to get rid of him. Aaron said, "What about El Fuego? How long was El Fuego? He wasn't there long, was he?"
Oh, he was there for quite a while. I mean, because the Flame lost to Loser Leave Town. El Fuego comes in. Yeah, he was there for quite a while.
But now that was at first. That was what was the guy's name that did that thing?
Mason. Roger Mason was when he came in, but he didn't last. He didn't last 3 weeks. It seemed like,
and he was good.
And then Jody was back.
He was really good.
And at the same time, Jody was running the Deep South, I think, in Atlanta. I believe that's right.
He was in his process, I think, starting it because I remember he borrowed the camera.
He borrowed the camera. Borrowed the camera.
I remember that happening. Michael Barr, what was the powder substance thrown in the eyes? Usually baby powder.
Asbestos.
That's right.
I mean, that's when you're a real heel, you want that lasting effect.
You want them to get the heat with the boys when you throw it in. Nice shirts, Brent Rodney. Yours too, Rodney. Hey, I remember one time we poor old Wendell Cooley. They wanted the stuff to smell good, so he was in Memphis, and Bill Dundee was booking at the time. I think Wendell was Rick Casey at the time. I think that's what he went as there. But they go to throw they get the what was it? It was some kind of real stuff that smelled awful, and they throw it in his eyes, and he doesn't close his eyes, and it messed his eye up, and he had a permanent place in his eye where they threw that stuff because he didn't get his eyes closed. But they tried to reuse the real stuff. That maybe never a good idea. We actually used ether one time, and the guy put it on the rag, and he said, "I almost passed out." On the rag, he said, "About never got in the ring to it was Jerry Stubbs." Actually, I didn't know that was going to be. I didn't know we actually got ether. It was actually ether that we bought. So Wendell had a problem because he'd already got stuff through in his eyes, having it in his face.
And the thing about it is that to do that properly, you have to have that smell. It has you have to have the smell. The fans have to be able to smell it.
Yeah, they had to. So we did that and put Wendell Cooley to sleep, and he lost the Continental Heavyweight title with Jerry Stubbs' help. How does that compare to a Dr. Pepper and a pickle?
Nothing compares to that.
I mean, you think about it today, a pickle's probably expensive now. Maybe be $4 or $5 for that pickle now. So you'd be getting off pretty good these days. Michael said, "I had heard the Fuller territory from sources I cannot mention. I have heard that about the Fuller territories from sources I cannot mention." That never has come up until this A&E deal. So I've said this many times: to bring back wrestling, you have to disbelief somehow. Yes, and it can be done. It can be done. Michael said, "Getting the fans coming back weekly Ridge is what old school wrestling was about." Yes. Michael Barr, wise guy. I want to be there, Jack. Make kayfabe important again. Just make them believe what you're doing that night. They don't have to believe it afterwards, but make them believe what you're doing that night. Let's see. Aaron, did the powder substance being thrown vary from territory to territory? Apparently, it was part of the payoff.
We're never going to finish this show.
Oh man, whatever you do, don't let the Fuller family hear this, because we'll get the email.
Yeah.
Only allow guys with some size of them to get the business of work, or the smaller guys can be managers or referees. I think as long as they can wrestle, I'm all right with it. It's
Yeah,
the ones
Danny Davis was not a big guy, but he's one of the best I was ever in the ring with. There's a place for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was salt for the pickle. Hey, by the way, now they did throw salt because Tojo Yamamoto threw all kinds of salt. He actually had a little bit of money invested into the salt company, so he didn't have to pay so much for it. That was a lie. don't take that around to people and say, I understand Tojo had some money into the Morton Salt Company.
It was the Morton Salt Company, you know. Ricky's family. They got
Oh, this I'm gonna tell you what.
And look, I'm only drinking lemonade, so
this hit the fan. Yes, this is true. He said, Jack, some guys are smaller than Danny Davis. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think it's all right as long as the small guys wrestle against the small guys. I think you're fine. You know, I used to be completely against it. I remember we went to Bonifay, Florida one time. Ted Allen was going to bring the ring. Ted Allen at the last moment decides he wasn't going to bring the ring. And so he has some guys bring the ring, and he agreed to let them two guys wrestle. Well, he tells me about this one day before the show. Well, there wasn't much more I could do about it, but let the guys wrestle. And then when I get there, and the guys are really small. I mean, I'm talking small. And they were going against this big old guy that you remember his name was Terry Bronson. I think that was his name.
Remember him.
He was a blonde-headed kid. He was with Lou Fabiano, team with Lou Fabiano a lot. And I told them, I said, I want him. I went to the guy and said, in this match, he's all he's going to do, he's going to eat your lunch and beat you 1, 2, 3. Well, evidently, he really thought there was a lunch there, and he was the guy was going to eat. because, and the reason I say that, because he got really, really mad later on when the match was over. He said, you didn't give me nothing. I said, well, I said in the match, you're going to do some tough stuff to him, and then he's going to eat your lunch, and then you're going to get paid. I said, what did you think eat your lunch was? Well, I don't know, but I could have done more. That was the wrong concept. I should have moved them around, maybe had them two guys that were the smaller guys wrestle each other. Have Louis go against, just didn't think about it. That was the wrong steps to do. And that was wrong in my part. And so that's the kind of things that all right, we better get to this thing real quick. We better get, because I think it took us a while to do this. We are redoing one, guys, that we did about John Olin and we say his
before
name
the great Gadsden dogfight occurred.
And we say his name is Caddick. That's how we're going to say his name, right? Caddick.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Caddick. All right. Let's start this thing. Well, we will start it when I find it. I did open it. What did I do with it? All right, here we go. Going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside Out. This is our World Champion Series, and we look at the next World Heavyweight Champion, but it gets a little complicated. Jack?
The World Heavyweight Championship picture would get even more complicated when John Olin would defeat Joe Stetcher on December 11th, 1916 in Springfield, Massachusetts, to become the World Heavyweight Champion. Johann Frederick John Olin was a Finnish wrestler who competed in the 1912 Summer Olympics. He won the silver medal in the heavyweight class. So how did the world title picture get complicated? On December the 11th, 1916, Olin captured a claim to the World Heavyweight Championship after a controversial bout with Joe Stetcher in Springfield, Massachusetts. In one of the great forgotten matches and upsets in wrestling history, he defeated Stetcher. After 2 hours and 40 minutes, both wrestlers ended up outside the ring brawling. Olin wanted to continue, but Stetcher declined to return to the ring. Olin was awarded the bout by the referee. Stetcher injured his shoulder during the match and was out of the ring for over 1.5 months. In newspaper reports, there was no mention of the title made. Why the public continued to support Stetcher is unclear. John Olin's promoters claimed the world title, but Olin was mild-mannered and didn't make much noise about being the champion. It may be that the press refused to accept Olin as champion because his win was a fluke due to injury, and no one believed Olin could truly defeat Stetcher. Also, Frank Gotch was still alive at the time, and many still saw him as the real world champion. As Stetcher didn't consider himself defeated, the idea of Olin as champ had much going against it. This claim to the title, called the Olin line by historians, did continue.
All right. Before the National Wrestling Alliance made changes to the rules in the 1950s, championships changed hands through disqualification or countout. The result of this match should have led to Olin being recognized as the world champion. However, most newspapers did not recognize the title change. Since the match would have been a work or prearranged exhibition, Stetcher should have won. Olin wasn't known outside of his home state. Stetcher wouldn't drop the title to Olin until he was more well known. In the match itself, Stetcher dominated as expected, but oddly, Olin was able to withstand Stetcher's legendary scissor hold twice. The first time for 20 minutes, the second time for 14 minutes, while Stetcher would want to make Olin look good for future matches. It was unusual for Olin to have survived Stetcher's pet finishing hold once, much less twice. After 2 hours of wrestling, Stetcher and Olin rolled off the platforms where they were wrestling. Olin surprised Stetcher, grabbing Stetcher's wrist and throwing him over some chairs. Olin's obvious foul should have led to a disqualification, but referee Jim Barnes took no action. Jim Olin climbed back up into the ring. Stetcher stared at him a few seconds, turned and walked and left the competition area. Barnes awarded the match to Olin based on Stetcher's withdrawal. Olin's manager, and I don't know that, Jamar Ludden claimed the title.
By the way, at this point in time, wrestling rings were a little different. They did not actually have ropes to them. It was just a mat. There was no ropes at this point during this point in time. Now, there are photographs of this that we will put up, and you'll see that it was just a platform. It was not really a wrestling ring. It was
still an elevated platform. It wasn't on the floor.
Yes, it was elevated, but it did not have ring ropes around it. The newspapers, which was the sports mass media, still recognized Stetcher as the champion, but expressed surprise at his loss. I think the loss may have been an attempted double cross, which Stetcher short-circuited it walking back to the dressing room. When Stetcher was fouled so obviously by Olin, was not disqualified, I think he was suspicious of the referee. Olin couldn't have beaten Stetcher in a catch as catch can match. The only way to double cross Stetcher would to be fixed the referee. If Stetcher lost on the mat by referee's decision, Olin would have a much better claim to the title. Stetcher returning to the dressing room after an obvious foul gave him a stronger case that the loss didn't mean loss of his title. If Stetcher had him rematch with Olin, I would have thought the controversy was a setup for a future match. However, they didn't wrestle again until 1920. While professional wrestling had firmly moved into the work era by 1916, the champions always had to be wary of a double cross. If the double cross was successful, the wrestlers had no choice to go along with it or expose the business. Double crosses became much more common in the 1920s and 1930s. This incident demonstrated the double cross was an occupational hazard anytime you worked a match.
After Joe Stetcher lost the title to John Olin by countout, Olin started his own line of the title, and Stetcher continued as the world champion as well. But the next world champion on the Stetcher line would become Earl Caddock on April 9th, 1917, in Omaha, Nebraska. Caddock was born February 27th, 1888, in Huron, South Dakota, to the parents of German Jewish heritage. His family name may have been Caddock or Caddock or Craddock, but he used the spelling Caddock exclusively throughout his wrestling career. As a child, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and the family moved to Chicago, where he could be treated. Swimming was recommended as part of this treatment. He was given a membership in the local YMCA to facilitate this. During his time at the YMCA, young Earl was exposed to wrestling. After his father was killed in a bizarre accident in which he fell down a manhole, Earl Caddock moved to his uncle's farm in Anita, Iowa. He continued to wrestle and won many local championships. In 1907, he returned to Chicago to enter college. There, he received further training from Benny Rubin and joined the Chicago Athletic Association. It was around this time that he met Charlie Cutler and Ernest Cartgee, two professional wrestlers. From 1914 to 1915, Caddock won the AAU Light Heavyweight Championship twice and the AAU Heavyweight Championship one time.
Through Cutler and Cartgee, Caddock was introduced to Frank Gotch and Martin Farmer Burns, who began training him for professional wrestling. On June the 8th, 1915, Earl Caddock made his professional debut in a match against Jesse Westergaard in a handicap match at the Anita Opera House. Westergaard agreed to pin Caddock twice in 1 hour, but no falls were recorded within the time limit. Under the handicap rules, Caddock was awarded the win. It was an impressive debut considering the competition. Although not many of the results were known from 1909 to 1914, Caddock was the dominant amateur middleweight and lightweight in the country. A story later reported in the newspapers is that local farmers in Barre, I hope that's right, Iowa, arranged a match between two local champion amateurs, Caddock and the heavyweight Joe Stetcher. The two wrestled in a barn in front of 38 people, with Stetcher winning the 2 out of 3 fall match. Stetcher turned pro, accepting his first purse of $3.80, while Caddock remained an amateur. On July the 4th, 1915, Caddock was at ringside to watch Joe Stetcher defeat Charlie Cutler for the world title. Stetcher was undefeated, and no one in wrestling had come close to taking a fall from him.
You know, after that $3.80, Dr. Pepper and a pickle sounds pretty good.
Yep.
Gene Milady and Oscar Thorson, the two major promoters in the Midwest, visit Caddock. Milady was a rich rancher and livestock broker who had played on the first football team at Notre Dame and was well known as an amateur boxer. His interest in sports and a reputation as a responsible businessman led to the promotion and the rejuvenation of the wrestling game. There was a lot of big words in that little statement. He had been the promoter of the Big Stetcher versus Cutler card and was considered one of the powers in pro wrestling. Milady announced that he was working on a Caddock and Ben roller for Atlantic. The press soon started building him into a contender for the world champion, Joe Stetcher. On December 1st, 1915, he met his biggest challenge and a huge shooter named Marion Palestina. I guess that's how you would say his name. Palestina was a student of Farmer Burns. And by the way, I think Farmer Burns and Frank Gotch, I believe they ran the wrestling business at this point in time. It just seems to me they ran the wrestling business. Who would later become an outlaw wrestler that challenged the power of the New York City Wrestling Trust by breaking kayfabe and exposing the business. He was immortalized in the book Fall Guys for losing shoots to Ed Lewis and getting fouled in a New York City match with John Pezic. On this night, Palestini lost 2 straight falls to Caddick with Stetcher and Gotch watching ringside. In January 1916, he signed a contract to be managed by Gene Milady. The two would stay together for the rest of his career. Milady gave Caddick the title, the Man of 1,000 Holds. It was named later passed on to many wrestlers, but it fit none better than Caddick. The actual number of holds may be exaggerated, but he was a graceful artist who used skill to overcome the savagery of wrestlers who outweighed and outstrengthened him, but could not outbrain him.
It is wrong to say that Caddick didn't have a favorite wrestling finishing hold, because he did use a head scissors to win in most of his major matches. He would get a head scissors on his opponent and then twist his body so that he was almost sitting on the wrestler's head, and then completed the move by getting an arm bar. His weight then bore down until his opponent's shoulders were pinned. The move looked great and gave him a credible way to pin wrestlers 30 to 50 pounds heavier. During this time, the wrestling world was preparing for a super match between Frank Gotch, who, though retired, was still thought of as the world champion by the public, and the new king, Joe Stetcher. In May 1916, Caddick traveled with the Sales Floto Circus and helped train Gotch for the match. Every night, Earl would wrestle exhibitions with Gotch. Bob Mangaroff, or Farmer Burns. World heavyweight boxing champion Jess Willard was also with the circus. On July the 18th, Frank Gotch fractured his left leg wrestling Mangaroff, and the Big Gotch versus Stetcher match was off, and Gotch's health would continue to deteriorate. Wrestlers' attention turned to the next big match, Stetcher versus Caddick.
The Stetcher versus Caddick world title match was signed March 1917 to be promoted by Milady and held in Omaha using a promotional tool that great sports rivalries between Nebraska and Iowa. Earl trained at the famed Chicago Athletic Club with Charlie Cutler and Bob Manigoff. Frank Gotch joined them in April, and he was in Caddick's corner the night of the match. This match took place on April 9th, 1917 in a sold-out arena. The attendance was 7,500 for a gate of $14,000. But scalpers had been charging as much as $8 for a $1 ticket. Stetcher, who outweighed Caddick 205 to 180 pounds and was 3-1 and was the 3-1 favorite. But there wasn't much Caddick money on the street, as some gamblers had to give 5-1 odds in the action. The match started slowly, but with both wrestlers on their feet. Stetcher's trying to take the challenger down, but Caddick blocked him at every attempt for almost an hour. Visualizing the terrible 5-hour Stetcher versus Ed Lewis match, the year before, the fans became restless. It seemed that the big bet on Caddick's Iowa followers had been that Stetcher would not throw Earl in an hour, and it was presumed that Earl was trying to make them money before taking any chances.
Their fears were forgotten when both wrestlers went on the offense, with Stetcher getting the better of the action. At one point, Caddick fell from the ring and into the ringside seats, hitting his head. He climbed back into the ring dazed, soon falling victim to Stetcher's body scissors and wrist lock, being put on his back and pinned after 1 hour and 22 minutes. This is the first time Caddick had been pinned in his pro wrestling career. After the 10-minute rest, the wrestlers returned from the dressing rooms. At the start of the second fall, both wrestlers began to mix it up, but this time Caddick had the best of Stetcher. Many times his quickness got him behind the champion, and Stetcher seemed powerless to stop him. At the 50-minute mark off the second fall, Caddick took Stetcher down and got a pin, but the referee refused to allow the fall because both men were partly off the mat. The decision almost started a riot. Caddick's dominance of the exhausted Stetcher continued when Caddick actually won the second fall in 1 hour and 40 minutes using a reverse Nelson and a head hold to pin Joe. The crowd went nuts, as this was the first time that Stetcher had ever been pinned. Between falls, the wrestlers returned to the dressing rooms at the completion of the rest. Caddick returned, but Stetcher did not. Joe Hettebeck, his manager, then came to the ring and announced that the champion could not continue the match. Caddick was awarded the match and the world title. Caddick had overcome size and skill and speed to record one of the wrestling's biggest upsets, being one of his greatest legends. His fame was no longer limited to Iowa. I noticed Stetcher loved that finish, evidently.
Stetcher had many excuses for his fans that had lost their wages betting on him. At first, he claimed he wasn't told to return to the ring and could have continued if he had been reminded of the time. Later, he claimed he lacked conditioning from wrestling weak opponents, such as Ad Santel on the West Coast. He then blamed travel and an injury. By April 17th, he was saying that he was beaten fairly. 2 weeks later, Caddick began defending his title with wins over Ivan Makalov, probably Mangroff, and Bill Schoenberg. On April 30th, 1917, he defeated a Bill Hokuff at Waterloo, Iowa, with Frank Gotch refereeing the match. The only noteworthy thing about this match is that Hokuff, who outweighed Caddick by 50 pounds, won the second fall. This was the second time Caddick had been pinned, and the 3 count was the only offense Hokuff had in the whole match. On May 1st, 1917, Caddick was scheduled to meet Frank Gotch in a short exhibition match. But the night that card was changed to Gotch beating Leo Pardello and Caddick versus Ernest Cartier. To demonstrate the drawing power of the two, it should be noted that the attendance was 10,000. John Olin was still claiming the world title due to his win over Stetcher as well.
Up to this time, booking of professional wrestling matches seemed to be in the control of wrestling managers. Win and losses were decided by who had the more popular client or by how much money could be made from the gamblers. It was very possible that a higher percentage of the wrestler's income came from betting than from the actual gates. By the late teens, this reliance on gambling, on the gambling side of the sports, was coming to an end due to public pressure and efforts of law enforcement. The power of professional wrestling was probably in the hands of Gene Milady, manager of Ed Caddick, who promoted Cutler versus Stetcher on July the 4th, 1915, Stetcher versus Lewis, July 4th, 1916, and Stetcher versus Caddick, and April 9th, 1917. By the end of 1917 and the beginning of 1918, the system had led to a log jam of long, tedious draws that were a threat to the popularity of the sport. We talked about that earlier. Around the time of this match, a meeting was held between promoters, Gene Milady, Carl Marfigi, I'm sorry, Oscar Thorson, Jack Curley, and Otto Flotto, and newspapermen such as Ed Smith and Sandy Griswold. Curley proposed rule changes such as time limit decisions and one-fall matches. It was Curley's idea to make wrestling more like boxing, with pins being like KOs and decisions accepted as true victories. Curley walked away from the meeting with his rule changes, some which would last over time. New York City's reliance on one-fall matches, while the less popular were hidden or thrown away. Nevertheless, Curley and New York City had shown newfound power over the sport.
I have to say, I believe Stetcher's the one they always came up with. He would not return to the ring for that next fall. He did it with Olin. Then he turns right back around and does it again. So it must have been his finish.
Yes.
He must have done this everywhere
to
he
keep
went.
To keep from getting beat.
Keep from being beat, yes. And maybe even to keep from beating somebody. It just seems to be that way. What's very interesting about this is when we talk about the Gold Dust Trio, which they're giving credit for changing the wrestling to one falls and doing some of that. But as we see in 1917, this is being done by a group of promoters. So it looks to me like there's a possibility they picked up the ideal that they'd already heard about somewhere down the line. So it goes back to say there's no new ideas in wrestling, just ones that you took that nobody else knew about. And that's just basically what it comes down to. Any final thoughts on this? The seventh world heavyweight champion. By the way, Olin was not recognized as a champion. He was never recognized by the newspapers as a champion. Even though he goes down as a champion, he's not recognized as one. Earl Caddick is recognized as the seventh world heavyweight champion. Jack?
No, nothing there.
Rodney? If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the page. Go one step further, hit that notification bell, and make sure that somebody tells you about the time so you can get back to the ring. We'll see you in the next video. That's just crazy stuff.
I hit that bell and my little girl in the bedroom went, huh?
I must have woke her up.
And I just heard her say, "It's not funny, Dad."
All right, let's see. Let's go back to trying to go back to see where we was at. Did we see the Jack said? I think we'd seen that, didn't we? Guys are smaller than Danny Davis. Yeah, I think we talked about that. Richard did say, Jack, some of these guys are smaller than Danny Davis. Yes. Michael Barr, interesting subjects here tonight. Richard, all the talent should wear wrestling boots. That's one of Jack's pet peeves.
Nope.
Again,
enough to make him get mad.
He was going to be. There's a guy named Matt Gilbert, and he would not book him because he would refuse to wear boots. And Jack will not. All right, here we go. Jack won't book nobody if they don't have wrestling boots. He won't book you if you don't have wrestling tights. So that's, I mean, not wrestling, wrestling gear. He won't. If you get jeans and stuff, you tell you go home. And I agree with that.
That is correct.
Boxing guy, we must have a new supporter here. Boxing guy, Brian the Barrett must be with us. Either that, he snuck in. Sadly, the kayfabe genie is out. This is true. This is true. For real, Richard, this is why boots are laced up. I'm not for sure what he's talking about. Oh, Richard has said not amateur wrestling shoes, Timberland boots, or tennis shoes. So, Richard, I'm gathering you've seen some people with these.
Yeah, I've seen them. I have ease to the point where I can live with kick pads if they're quality made, you know. But if you've bought them from Sports Authority, no, ain't happening.
Aaron asked about the boots from eBay Wrestling Boots. Jack, I don't know nothing about it, but
there's a couple of companies. I know the one out of Puerto Rico sells on eBay, and they're fairly decent boots. I send guys. There's a guy named Ace out in Texas that makes really good quality boots. He makes the old Dusty Rhodes style cowboy boot. And then there's a guy in Australia, Steve the Shoe Man, that I send a lot of guys to. He makes for several in WWE. Good quality, great turnaround. You know, guys are just wanting to be cheap. They're not wanting to spend money on wrestling boots, and they don't understand that a $300 or $400 investment will last you for years. But you know they'd rather spend half that on kick pads that wear out in 6 months.
Michael Barr said that if you trust eBay, there's some real wrestling boots sold on eBay. Michael Barr also, why was it that old school wrestling days, the old over top rope was a disqualification? Because there had to be some rules.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you didn't have rules, you had no rule breakers. You had to develop rules so people would hate somebody. I mean, that's what's wrong now. Nobody hates them because there's no rules.
Yeah.
You know, even a good Western, there's rules. When you go into the town you sometimes had to give your guns up. And you knew who the bad guy was because he'd always slip that one gun down in his boot. And he'd keep that thing. And then when the fight started breaking out, he'd get out and shoot somebody. Then all heck break loose. And then now we know who the bad guy is. And Clint Eastwood's going to come in and kick some tail. Now, but we told the rules though. You can't have that here, and we don't allow no fighting in our bars. And that'll be the first guy that would cause a fight in the bar. See, that's what Jack was good at. Now, here's the rules, and he'd make sure he'd break all of them. So the people understood that he was the bad guy. He'd choke you with it. He'd choke you with that, so you knew he was the bad guy. So he had to break the rules. If it wasn't a deal not choking people, he would never get any heat because he was not against the rules. And that's the importance of rules. It's very important to have rules. Because you can't get mad at somebody. It's hard to break a rule. Gordon Soley's favorite, catch you. That's a hard word to say, ain't it? Catch as can wrestling. That is a hard word. Yeah, that is the $3.80 match put Andalusia, Alabama on the map.
That's right.
The $3.80. Oh, I already said that. I'm reading that thing over again. We do not see olds moves like the flying head scissors, the pile driver, the abdominal stretch, figure four leg like seldom makes up if what's Ric Flair's Charlotte. I think Charlotte uses it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does she use it the way Flair used it?
Yes.
No, she changes it up just a little bit. She does a bridge.
That's right. I did see her do the bridge.
Okay. Why were these holds removed? I have no clue. At some point, even those can be tired node. You got to be very careful with that as well. That's the reason talent had to be moved out.
I still see the head scissors pretty often. Pile drivers were taken out because they were feared to legitimately hurt people. Because that's how Owen Hart and put Steve Austin out for quite a while. So they limited those. They keep them away for those purposes. The abdominal stretch, every great now and then I see it. I saw Les have a fit because somebody on some show had put it on and didn't hook a leg, and he was like, "If you're gonna do it right, or just don't do it." And I agree.
Yeah. Let's see some really good old school wrestling stories. Some really good old school wrestling stories. Yes, Rick Brooks. Speaking of nicknames used by more than one wrestler, who else was referred to the eighth wonder of the world? Not for
Andre
sure.
And China.
She was the ninth wonder of the world, wasn't she?
Was she not? Okay.
Well, the Stomper was called that by Don Carson, but that was leading up to the match between the Stomper and Andre.
I will tell you, if somebody else was called the eighth wonder and Andre the Giant knew it, he wouldn't want to be in the same territory as him. Yeah. He didn't like John Studd stepping over the top rope. He was the only giant, he said, and he beat him up because of that too. So John Studd wasn't too smart when it comes to just do what Andre tells you. Buzz wouldn't have worked for him. Who are we talking about, I wonder? How can an NWA promoter have another world champion than the Alliance? Y'all were talking about Don Fargo, Ties and Tired in Atlanta in the 60s. They wasn't supposed to have, and really most of the NWA wouldn't have done it. It was done, but those people probably wasn't part of the NWA. Jack Pfeffer did it, but Jack Pfeffer was not really, I don't believe he was part of the National Wrestling Alliance. They probably knew him. Rick Brooks says Pampiro Firpo. Well, I don't know. Never heard of that, but we'll have to look at that. I thought Jack was unhappy with the wrestler showing up with a pair of eBay replica boots.
Yep, his name was Tommy Rich. And what I'm talking about, those were the costume boots. They're made real thin material. They don't hold up. They're made for a costume. They're not made to actually wrestle.
So you went by the Halloween store, huh?
Yeah, and they look as cheap as I'm describing them.
Jack, if you find out that one of the wrestlers that you school had gone out to a bar and drank and started trouble, would you fire that wrestler?
Only if you got beat up.
That's Bill Watts' thought process. Paul Orndorff's belt was took away from him because of that. He got beat by somebody at a bar, and he said, well, if that guy can beat you, anyone can. So he took the belt away from him. So that did happen to him. All right, guys. Jack, I think it's time before we run out of time here. I think we'll do this other thing, but I guess we'll go ahead and tell everybody exactly what's going on Friday, October 8th. Friday, October 8th, we are going Pro Wrestling Inside and Out, which is Jack Lord, Rodney West, Brett West. We're going to be promoting a pro wrestling show, and it will be in Lafayette, Georgia, at the Lafayette Rec Center. And it'll be old school wrestling. Everybody talks about old school wrestling. It'll be old school wrestling. I think all the old time wrestling fans will enjoy the show. It'll be our first. I don't know, when was the last time we promoted a wrestling match, Rodney?
That would probably be Cleveland was the last one we did it.
What year was that, Jack?
Oh my goodness, 2006, something like that.
Or
2012.
2008. I think it was 2008, I believe. Maybe 2008. Yeah, so, I mean, that's a long time that we ever promoted a show. But we want to do this as part of the Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. We've contacted some great wrestlers, the people that understand old school wrestling and understand what we're trying to do. And we're not going to be running on a weekly basis or nothing like that. We'll run on Friday, October 8th, and I think maybe 6 or 8 weeks later we run again. And we won't be doing it maybe every other month. We'll be doing some shows that we'll play right here on YouTube. Well, won't play here. Well, I guess we are on YouTube right now, aren't we? That's the only place we're at right now. It will play on our YouTube channel as well. But it should be a good show. And somewhere I had downloaded the little poster that, let's see. Well, I thought I downloaded it. I don't know what I did with it, but I thought I downloaded a poster that Jack sent me today. But it is going to be in Lafayette, Georgia. And we will try to also put it on here for those people who cannot make the show. But anyway, I did download it. I don't know what I did with it. I did download the poster today. All right, there you go. Let me.
It's hard to see with lights, but
let me see if I can. But we'll start telling everybody more about it in the next few weeks. We'll slowly tell everybody about it. But it will be Friday, October 8th, and it will be our first attempt at promoting wrestling since we're going to say 2006, 2008. Mine and Rodney's anyway. Now Jack's done several during that point in time. But we joined the circus business and was there for 14 years, and so we're going to make an attempt to do that. And so if you're in the Lafayette, Georgia area, I'd like for you to be a part of it. It's going to we're going to have fun. It's going to be a fun night, and it's going to be a step back in time, basically. It will not be something.
And we will have a ladies match that night. I've got a guy that's he's never wrestled anywhere in this immediate area in the Southeast. He's from Texas, so he's really good. So we got a lot of good stuff. You know, we've handpicked some really good talent out there to come in.
Yeah, so it will be fun for us, and you know, we don't think we're going to set the world on fire. We're not. That's not what we think we're going to do. What we want to do is kind of show old school wrestling. Yeah. That's the important thing, and kind of keep old school wrestling alive. And we're not going to be running on a weekly basis or nothing, but we just want to show wrestling fans old school wrestling and really show the fans that we have. We've got like almost 31,000, about 30. 30,000, 250 to 300 people right now. By that time, we'll probably have around 40,000 followers of old school wrestling. So we want to give them an opportunity to go back in time a little bit and watch old school wrestling and see what it's about.
Michael, it's 302 miles. 302 miles. It's 4 hours and 49 minutes.
And there are hotels.
Yes, there are hotels, and we're only going to have right now. We're going to only set up for about 300 people. We can get more people than that, but right now that's what we're going to set up for. And our tickets are going to be like $15 a piece, very reasonable ticket price. So if you can plan on getting there, we like to see everybody there if you can. And we don't even have this really scheduled to make a lot of money off of it. So we're just doing it just like we do it for this. We don't make a lot of money on it. We don't plan on getting rich on it. So we do invite you to be a part of it. Somebody here said just like costume, mask. Costume.
Yeah.
Michael Barr sounds great. Everybody is invited to the show.
If you'll buy a ticket, we'll pat you on the back.
we can't let anybody in free unless you want to come and help us do certain things. There'll be certain jobs that we'll need help with that night. We'll talk about that. We're going to need a timekeeper, somebody to help us seat some people. So if you want to work with us that night, there are some jobs going to be available to help us, and it'll be like the pay that we got years ago, experience pay. So
might even be a Dr. Pepper and a hot dog in there because
we're
not going to have pickles,
so we can't give you pickles. Rick said that. He was also called the eighth wonder of the world as well as the wild bull of, what's that say? Pampas? I did not know this. What year did he wrestle? Was he wrestling in the 70s or was that mostly?
Yeah, I believe he was.
Yeah.
Seems like I've seen him with the primarily with the Chic stuff, Detroit.
Hey, Michael. I've told you I can forget people's names, and a minute times. The reason I can't never remember Dennis Gale's name, I forget sometimes what I'm even doing. Neat poster, by the way, and I do have that. I downloaded it and everything, but I cannot find it. I don't know where I downloaded it to. But we'll have it. We'll put it on here soon. Hate to disappoint fans, but I'm already booked elsewhere. I'm sorry. Me. Michael Barr asked, is he one you were saying how long it was? Mm-hmm. Richard Hood said he just checked back in. So you missed Lafayette, Georgia, Friday, October 8th. Lafayette, Georgia. We're going to do old school wrestling matches there. Yep. Pro Wrestling Inside Out presents is basically what it's going to be, championship wrestling.
Be at the rec center there, and it's a very, very nice facility.
Yes. Michael Barr, thanks for the info, Rodney. I will be coming there via my company chat.
Excellent. You can park it next door to mine.
60s to 80s. Okay, 60s to 80s. All right, guys, are y'all ready to do this last World Champion Series? This is made for one person to read.
Okay.
Jack, you want to read that, and then we'll comment on this because this really shows the badness, the complicated world title picture. I mean, it's really bad. I'll start it up, and then we'll talk about it. Going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. This is our continuous series on the world champions. They are an 8th world champion, but there is a lot of complications to get there. And Jack, I think you've got just a little bit of the complications that went on to get to the 8th world heavyweight champion.
On May the 2nd, 1917, Ed Strangler Lewis defeated John Olin for a version of the world title in Chicago, Illinois. His billing as world champion is based on Olin's win over Joe Stetcher in 1916. Frank Gotch is the referee. On June the 5th, 1917, Waldeck Zbyszko defeats Ed Strangler Lewis for his version of the world title in San Francisco. And then on July 4th, 1917, Ed Strangler Lewis recaptures the offshoot world title from Waldeck Zbyszko in Boston, Massachusetts. Lewis wins his title back when Waldeck is unable to continue during the third fall. Zbyszko won the first fall after a body roll into a pin. Lewis then pinned Zbyszko using a half Nelson after Waldeck had injured his right elbow and leg. Zbyszko gamely started the third fall but was thrown to the mat and submitted in 45 seconds. Lewis is announced as the new world champion. Waldeck Zbyszko wins the offshoot world title from Lewis on December 22nd, 1917 in New York, but Lewis continues to claim the title. Kata defeats Zbyszko on February 8, 1918 in Des Moines, Iowa to unify Zbyszko's part of the Olin line, but Zbyszko still claims ownership. Lewis defeats Zbyszko on May 19, 1918 in New York City, New York to make him the undisputed champion of the John Olin line, but not the Joe Stetcher line. Champion of the Stetcher line, Earl Caddock, defeats Lewis on June 21st, 1918 in Des Moines, Iowa, but Lewis still claims the title. On March 21st, 1919, Waldeck Zbyszko defeated Lewis for the title in New York. Then on May 19th, 1919, Joe Stetcher won the title from Zbyszko in Louisville, Kentucky. On January 30th, 1920, the title picture should become uncomplicated when Joe Stetcher defeated Earl Caddock to unify both the Olin and Stetcher lines. The lineage of the Stetcher line was carried forward, so Stetcher's title win is recognized as starting on January 30th, 1920, as opposed to May 19th, 1919. He won the title in New York. So this takes us to the 8th recognized world heavyweight champion. I hope y'all are keeping score.
This is incredible what went on during this point in time. But I'm going to tell you, looking back, reading the stuff that I read, I believe that Gotch and Burns, they knew exactly what they were doing in this whole process of this. They wanted a world champion that could be defended in different places at the same time, I believe.
What it sounded like, didn't it?
Yep.
It is just crazy how the title, though, changed so many times. And then when they did lose it, they still would say there was a champion. It goes back to what happened even in territories years later. When a guy would not want to lose the title, so he would leave. He'd just leave. And so they had to say, well, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Joe beat Bill Sky on so-and-so night. It's incredible what happens when you read that. When you read what Jack just read, it's just impossible to really have a champion that people's going to believe in. And I believe it takes some years even to get Joe Stetcher that people believe that he's the world champion. What do you think about this, Rodney?
It's convoluted, and I'm not sure how they able to keep it together without just wrecking the whole thing. Of course, it all goes back again to Frank Gotch's refusal to drop the title, and that's goes back to him. But I think you're right. I think it's all been this whole thing where they had multiple people that way they can run several different towns and have world title matches all over the place.
I believe that could have been the issue. I believe that the promoters were just all wanting world heavyweight titles. This is the one question I want to ask as well. Did Joe Stetcher have a problem being beat as well?
Sure does sound like it.
I mean, was this an ongoing problem when it started with Frank Gotch? George Hackenschmidt looked like he didn't mind putting someone over. It seemed to start with Frank Gotch, and from that point, nobody really wanted to do the job to lose the championship. They wanted to do it in a way that they didn't really get beat, and so they could really claim to be world heavyweight champion. So when it happened, when it eventually happened in the 1970s and 80s, when we come around, basically, there was nothing new was happening in 1917. Well, the world heavyweight champion Joe Stetcher, we'll look at him again, as he is the world heavyweight champion for quite some time. Probably a good thing that he becomes the champion and holds it for a little bit of time. If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the page. Go one step further, hit that notification bell. Do one thing. Right below, you'll see another World Champion series that we have done. Click on it and continue watching it right here on Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. We'll see you in the next video. Brent, Jack, and Rodney, was it the circus that started the wrestling territories? Yeah, no, it was not the circus that did it. It's a very interesting story of how it came about, but to a certain extent, now I will tell you that the Gold Dust Trio did kind of start territories. They were the forerunner of the territory, and once they did, now that is the one thing they did start. Territories where they'd have a promoter here and they'd have a promoter there, and they would run regular matches. So that did happen, and because they came up with the work aspect of it, knowing that they're going to return matches and stuff. Was it wrestlers that became managers and hired bookers that made up territories? I would say by most, I believe they were wrestlers, but most of the time they were always a money man behind them. You know, Nick Goulas wasn't a wrestler. So, and I don't know about you guys, but do you think it was much better when it wasn't wrestler ran to a certain extent? Or was it better than when wrestlers ran it?
I think it was better when the owners were not wrestlers.
Yeah. Rodney?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you had Nick Goulas, you had Roy Welch at the point when he was very successful. He wasn't wrestling, and not because he probably didn't want to, he just wasn't able to. But it was just a different type of territory then, and it was all about whether or not you could draw money. And for some reason, in the 80s, that, let's be honest, Jared Alder was in Memphis too long. Bill Dundee was in Memphis too long. You know, when you look at Alabama, we all love Bob Armstrong, but he was there too long. The Fullers were there too long. This guy stayed there too long. Same thing happened to Georgia. Tommy Rich was there too long. Wrestling 2 was there too long. People just stayed there too long, and the wrestling business never can survive that. People don't want to see the same thing over and over again. They want to see something different, and so. All right, let's go with these three other, and then we're going to get off of here and call it a night. And tomorrow night, we're going to look through what we forgot to do last week, Rodney. We forgot to look through that National Wrestling Alliance.
Okay.
There, we forgot to convolute it. New World. Rick.
It means it is extremely complex and difficult to follow.
Yes.
There you go. Stick with us.
That's all right. We'll learn you on here.
The Gordon Sully word of the day.
Because a convoluted narrative encompasses all manner of digressions.
Rick Brooks said, I know Firpo worked AWA Detroit and the LA territories, and he may have worked Texas some. I think he did.
I think he did.
I really believe we've seen some.
I think he just passed away a few years ago. Not all that long.
Who was the real world heavyweight champion? Being there are so many out there. Well, at that point, it became Joe Stetcher. Now, I don't know about now. I know for sure who the real world champion. I don't know if there is such thing.
And knowing that the business is a work, I don't know that it's even important anymore. I mean, WWE has certainly shown us that the championships are meaningless.
Yeah, it's a prop to them. Some promoters that wasn't workers had successful promotions. Yes, they did. A lot of them did, and some of them did have good. I mean, you talk about Eddie Graham, such a successful company, and his success waned a little bit in 1984, and we know what happened and all that. We don't even have to get into that. We don't have time to get into that tonight, but it's all about respect for the business, and I agree with that. All right, guys, we're going to see everybody tomorrow night. We're going to we'll go over that NWA book next week. Jack's got a story on Tom Drake. We'll do the story on Pro Wrestling USA. We'll talk about it a little bit, and so we'll see you. But tomorrow night, bring up your number 98. Mine's Gino Hernandez. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night right here. It's 9:40 p.m. where we're at, so it's time to get off here and go to sleep and get up for another exciting day. All right, thank